questions.
My first question is about this thing you mentioned called neurotic conflict, where you said, quote, "I don't know anyone who doesn't have it," end quote. What is neurotic conflict, and why is it so ubiquitous?
Good question. Neurotic, I think we can guess that the root has to do with neuro, right? That's close enough, I guess, for now. Neurosis has been looked at differently across the last, say, century, and I'm not sure that it's a thing in other cultures, and there's many different ways to formulate it, and there's many ways to create taxonomies. I mean, you can in this world you're going to find there are splitters, right? People who want to make a construct into smaller and smaller pieces, right? And then we have lumpers, people who want to lump it all together. When I said that, I was just kind of lumping things so people could realize that it is a normal state of affairs in the modern industrialized world to have mixed feelings or thoughts about everything. As a matter of fact, if you don't have that, that's a little different. You're a fanatic, perhaps. And so the way I conceptualize it is that there's a conflict between two impulses, or between a thought and an impulse, or between a feeling and a thought, or between, so that's kind of the general template. Can you be more specific?
I forget the context in which or the specific example you used for it, but now that you mention it, I never thought of this thing splitter and lumper. I guess I would call myself naturally more of a splitter. So is the idea of like, I want to get this big overview and then chop it up and then compartmentalize, like this topic goes down into this rabbit hole, this topic goes down into this rabbit hole and whatnot, like having that penchant for that type of conceptualization of things, that's a...
Right, and that's what psychiatry did over the last 100 years, let's say. And you chop it up enough and you end up with nothing. And you end up with people arguing about words and concepts and which basket should we put this or that. And the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the, say, the American Psychiatric Association, the lumpers lost to the splitters, and this is a gross oversimplification. And we have more and more little boxes, or less and less, and it's just fighting over nothing, right? I mean, you need a way to organize your study. You need a way to organize your understanding. That's very legitimate. But when it comes to a human being, right, it's not wise to see a human being as a walking DSM diagnostic category with this billing code. I was taught, and this is important, never to use the word borderline. Now that was one of the places where the professors did, stand up. And the reason not to call it someone borderline is because borderline character organizations, especially in young women, creates all kinds of problems on a unit, on an inpatient unit, or even in a clinic, but mainly inpatient. And they engender very, very strong feelings in the staff and in the family and everybody else, and the doctors. And so it becomes a pejorative. The diagnostic label becomes a pejorative. Now, once a diagnostic label becomes a pejorative, you should throw it out, in my opinion, because the patient must take priority. And so the reason we were instructed by one professor out of, I don't know, many, not to use that diagnosis is because it stopped us from thinking further. And so if you throw the label, this is an obsessive neurosis, this is a paranoid psychosis. This is a borderline person. Then the tendency, you're busy, you've got other patients, you've got other things to do, is to say, oh well, this one I know what I'm dealing with, and then you apply the book to the person, and invariably you miss the important nuance. And so, same thing's true with neurosis. What I want is for people to understand that it's normal to have some conflicts internally between your mind and your heart, right? Within your mind, you could be pro-war, you could be against war, you could be, well, wars, or you could be more grown up than that and realize that sometimes it's necessary. It should be avoided at all costs. But you can see how it's okay to have conflicting thoughts and feelings about that. Now, if some of those are unconscious, which is how the thing I think was originally formulated by the psychoanalysts, going back to Anna Freud and others, I think that it becomes a label, right? And what does it say in the Tao Te Ching? Second line of the Tao Te Ching: names can be given, but not permanent labels. Do you see? And so you can use these words and these categories therapeutically. You could use them in a suggestive way. You could use it to stop suffering in another way. And a lot of times people don't realize that this is the normal human condition. And so that's probably the context. I wanted someone to say, hey, look at your mind, study your mind, because people walk around like it's a unitary block that somehow or another just magically produces their thoughts, their behaviors, and their suffering. And so when you could say, look, you're not mentally ill, you're not sick in the head, you don't have a disease. What you have is a conflict, a legitimate conflict. In your case, a developmental conflict between, say, something you'd love to do, but is wrong for you. Mm. Okay, and so that's probably the general spirit. And because of this, like when I'm supervising a lower level, not lower, I mean lower in terms of if you put it on a hierarchy, which is a mistake. It has nothing to do with the quality of the therapist. Now I lost my thought because I was worried about offending people by saying that lower and higher. Help get me back. It was about. Oh yeah, what I learned was that I'm talking about people right out of college. All right, so that they're lesser in terms of years of training or whatever. I just talk about the heart, the mind, the body, right? And they get it, right? It's easier to understand, and you don't have to get into the intellectualization, which, by the way, is a neurotic defense. So that's basically the spirit in which I do it. We can go back there if you'd like, but does that answer the question more or less?
Yeah, that answers the question.
Okay.
And relates